Good evening. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Plymouth City Council special agenda for Monday, January 26th, 2026 at 6:33 p.m. If I can get roll call.
Councilmember Bottomley. Here. Councilmember Dill. Here. Councilmember Hornish.
Here.
Vice Mayor Nunn.
That's an old sheet.
I'm sorry.
Here.
I'm sorry.
Here.
I'm
Good.
going to start over. I'm sorry. Councilmember Bottomley. Here. Councilmember Cranford. Here. Councilmember Dill. Here. Vice Mayor Hornish.
Here.
Mayor Nunn.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Could we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So can I get approval of City Council special meeting agenda of January 26th, 2026?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Bottomley.
Aye.
Councilmember Cranford. Aye. Councilmember Dill. Aye. Vice Mayor Hornish.
Aye.
Mayor Nunn.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, this time we're going to open the floor to special meeting public comment. That's Rosemary.
Rosemary Marino Moody, Plymouth. I just want to say I was grateful for the town meeting on Saturday. Unfortunately, a lot of people left because they couldn't hear, and I heard a lot of frustrations from people telling me, because I was sitting a little further up, so I didn't see how many people were actually leaving during the thing. So I know that the sound system has been a problem for a long time because I've sat here and listened to people say, we can't hear you. And it's really hard for you city council members to hear you when you're talking, especially when there were so many people in the room. So I was hoping that maybe you guys could look into a sound system or more speakers or something that could help. But also for you guys to, when you talk, maybe talk a little slower and clearer so people can understand you. Mayor Nunn, some of your stuff sounded so muddled. It was really hard to hear what you were saying. So. And other than that, I have some good news. Today, I saw the sheriff deputy pull over someone on Main Street by the school.
Thank you.
I was walking past my window and all of a sudden I saw this blue light and I'm like, what is that? I walked out and sure enough, someone was pulled over. I talked to a resident higher up on Main Street today and they said they saw one pulled over by a firehouse by the school also. So that was good. So something good came out of that meeting. So hopefully they're here to stay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah. Okay, we'll go to Zoom.
Thank you, Stephanie Moreno, city resident, small business owner. You didn't ask for public comment on the approval of the agenda. But if you had, I would have said that the agenda is titled wrong. On number 5.1, it says receive and discuss MBS water sewer rate draft report with possible direction. The draft report is not in the packet. And in fact, the staff report says that it has not yet been written and that tonight is just a presentation. So I'm asking that you fix the agenda so it doesn't give the false impression that the draft report was available for the public to see tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that, I thought that's what we did have in here.
We're going to have a presentation later about the water and sewer study and where that process is at.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to address what she's saying. I thought that's what we did have in the packet was the draft study or sewer rate report with possible, yeah. That's just presentation, okay. I'm figured out.
My agenda packet has item 5.1 listed as presentation on water and wastewater rate study and requesting city council input and direction to drop 218 rate setting.
But that's different.
So it needs to be,
What it says. That's it. Do you want to see what we're talking about? Do you care?
come on up here.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, actually.
Here is different than this. So which one is it?
The substance of what we're gonna be talking about is the water rate study and the wastewater rate study.
So we wanna amend this
We
one?
can amend it if that makes everybody happy. Substantively, we're getting to the same place.
Okay.
Well,
So then let's amend the agenda updated and have it say presentation on water and wastewater rate study and requesting city council input and direction to drop 218 to do prop 218 rate setting.
To match the title that was in the published agenda packet, correct?
Correct.
okay, so I will call for an amended approval. Right?
No.
You're still in public comment.
Oh, yeah, okay. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, nobody online, I'm gonna close public comment. Okay, so,
Okay, back to two.
yeah, we're gonna go back to 2. So approval of city council special meeting agenda of January 26, 2026. Make a motion that we approve it with the amendment made to item 5.1.
I'll second.
So moved, and then you can second.
I'll second.
Councilmember Bottomley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cranford, aye. Councilmember Dill, aye. Vice Mayor Hornish,
Aye.
Mayor Nunn.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, consent calendar items. 4.1. Do we have anything on there? No, 4.2. Okay, item 4.2, that, okay. So move for approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Oh, excuse me. Getting too much going on here. All right. In public comment on item 4.1 or 2, the consent calendar. Hearing, seeing none, move for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar with
January 8th.
for January 26, 2026.
January 8th.
January 8th, 2026.
Is that meeting minutes?
Regular.
Moving to approve the consent.
Yeah, the consent calendar. Just say consent calendar. I should know. Yeah, move to
I
approve.
make a move to approve the consent calendar.
There you go.
Second. Councilmember Bottomley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cranford, aye. Councilmember Dill, aye. Vice Mayor Hornish,
Aye.
Mayor Nunn.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, moving on, item 5.1. NBS water rate study. Let's open that. Well, first off. Yeah, I was gonna do the staff report first. We have that on there. We have staff report on that.
Good. California Proposition 218 requires agencies to notify property owners and ratepayers of proposed changes to utility rates and to hold a public hearing prior to implementing any increases. The purpose of this process is to ensure transparency and allow for public participation. Water and wastewater systems are essential services funded entirely by user rates. Periodic rate reviews and adjustments are necessary to ensure that revenues are sufficient to support operations, maintenance, capital improvements, regulatory compliance, and long-term financial stability. The city's most recent rate study was completed in 2017, and rate adjustments were last adopted in 2011. Since that time, increases in operating costs, infrastructure needs, and regulatory requirements have impacted the city's utility funds. In partnership with city staff, MBS is conducting comprehensive rate studies evaluating the city's water and wastewater enterprise funds. The studies review current and projected operating expenses, capital improvement needs, reserve targets, and revenue requirements over a 5-year planning period. Key factors driving the proposed rate adjustments include aging infrastructure requiring rehabilitation and replacement, inflationary increases in labor, energy, and chemical costs, state and federal regulatory mandates, the need to maintain reserve levels and debt service coverage ratios. Results of the studies will be presented with various rate scenarios. Staff and MBS are seeking direction from council regarding the preferred rate scenario to proceed with legislative steps necessary for rate approval. Approval of the rate adjustments is necessary to ensure the financial health of the city's water and wastewater utilities. Without adjustments, the city risks falling short of funding obligations for operations and capital projects. Mailing costs and consultant support for the Proposition 218 process are included in the current contract and will be paid from the Water and Wastewater Enterprise Fund. Our recommendation is that the City Council receive a presentation on the proposed adjustments to water and wastewater from MBS, provide direction regarding the preferred rate scenario, and authorize MBS to proceed with preparation of the rate report, notice of public hearing, and work with staff to schedule the next legislative steps of the Proposition 218 process. And we have Ms. Sarah Mears from MBS to present.
Okay, at this time, yeah.
I was gonna suggest that we maybe break up public comment after different chunks of Sarah's presentation, the way we did last time. Since I assume there will be questions after the public hears from Sarah. You okay with that?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, we can do it like that.
Okay. While the presentation is pulling up, I'll introduce myself. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. My name is Sarah Mears with NBS. It's my pleasure to be back here with you again to talk about your rate setting process. Just as a brief reminder, we were here having a conversation back in June of 2025 about your rates, and there was direction at that time to incorporate the adopted budget for 25-26. So we are now at a place where we have received the adopted budget and have worked through some of those changes. Obviously, with the delay in timing, that means that we are not implementing the rates in January of this year as we originally thought. So we're now looking at a July. So we've brought the rate study forward as well in order to reflect the timing. All right, so I think we have the presentation up. If we can go to the first slide. So we'll start first with the overview of the rate study, and then we'll go into the water rate study. The overview is meant to be an overview of just the rate setting process. So we'll go through that. Do you want to pause for public comment after the overview of the rate study, or only after we get through the water rate study portion?
I'd say probably after the overview, we could pause.
Okay, perfect.
Everybody concurs.
Sounds good. All right, so again, this is really just an overview of the rate setting process. Next slide. Why do we prepare a rate study? The reason we prepare a rate study is that it is required to comply with Proposition 218, which was an initiative that was voted on in 1996 and made part of California's Constitution. They're typically prepared every 5 years. It's been a little longer since your last study, so we're catching up a little bit. But what that study does is demonstrate fairness and equity of the rates. The Prop 218 requires that when you are adopting property-related fees, that they cannot exceed the cost of providing service, and the rate study demonstrates that cost of service application. The general methodology for a rate study includes 3 steps. The first is the financial plan and revenue requirement. That's the step where we're really looking at what are your sources of funds currently, What are the uses of funds, meaning what is your budget? We incorporate the operation and maintenance from the city budget into the rate study. We're looking at capital improvement plans. We're looking at your reserve funds to ensure that those are fully funded. Should you have any debt, make sure that you can cover the debt, et cetera. So really getting that financial picture. Once we do that, we do a cost of service analysis. That's where we proportionately allocate the cost of the services to the customer classes in compliance with industry standards. Then we do rate design, and that's where we consider what rate structure will best meet the needs of the city as well as collect the rate revenue that's required from each customer class. So that's the, in general, 3-step process. Next slide. Now, how do we determine those net revenue requirements? As I mentioned, we're looking at O&M, or operation and maintenance cost, that comes directly from the city's budget. Then we understand what level of debt might be owed if you have any outstanding debt or anticipate issuing debt for capital improvements that might be needed in the future. We're also looking at what your capital costs are. If you don't issue debt for those costs in the future, you may also fund capital through pay-as-you-go funding. And then we look at your non-rate revenue. Those can be things like licenses, fees, fines, applications, et cetera. There may be some other revenue coming into your funds, your utility funds. And that's how we determine what the net revenue requirement is. We really want to make sure that we have adequate levels of reserves as we go through this process, both for your operation and maintenance as well as for your capital. Really, that operation and maintenance reserve is meant to be a buffer should you have delinquencies in an economic downturn, should you have changes in your usage, anything like that. We want to be able to make sure that you can cover those O&M costs. From a capital perspective, having a capital reserve will allow you to deal with any emergency type situations if things break or what have you. So that's the goal in the rate setting. Next slide. I like to use these buckets to sort of explain how the funds flow in. We have utility revenue coming in, which is the income generated from your customers. So you're charging your water rates or your sewer rates to your customers who receive that service. And then the money that you receive pays for first your operations and maintenance. So that's the day-to-day kind of operating costs. Then funds flow into your reserve bucket should there be anything left over. That money fills up those reserves, particularly that operation and maintenance reserve, and then it can flow into either fund capital on a pay-as-you-go basis or fund other expenditures like debt service or what have you. It's kind of generally how I think about that revenue. Next slide. So now that we understand how much revenue the system requires, we're going to figure out how those costs are assigned to customers. For water, we typically allocate costs by understanding your system capacity cost, which is the overall system. And we typically look at the meter size as to understand how much capacity each customer has in the system. The commodity cost is the annual consumption. And so in that case, that's actually the water that's being delivered, which in general is purchased from Amador Water Agency. And then the customer costs, and that's typically things like your billing. So say you're mailing out bills to your customers once a month or bi-monthly, you have to print the bills, you have to mail them, you have to collect the funds, right? There's staff costs associated with that. So those are those costs. So we're looking at all of those costs and understanding how they are allocated to those 3 buckets, the capacity, the commodity, and the customer. But we're also then looking at each customer class to understand what share of the system each customer class represents. And again, typically we're looking at things like meter size, we're looking at the total volume, and that sort of thing, so that we can allocate appropriately to each of the customer class based on their share of the system. Next slide. Sewer cost works a little bit different. In general, the philosophy is the same. We're looking at the flow-related costs, so how much effluent is being generated by different types of property. And we're looking at the strength of that effluent. And that is recognized by something called biological oxygen demand, also known as chemical oxygen demand. Total suspended solids is that's how we're looking at the strength. And then we're also looking at customer costs and billing and so forth there as well. Again, we're going to also look at your customers and understand the groupings of customers based on their characteristics, figure out how much of what the proportional share of the system each customer class represents. And so it is important to note that we're focused on classes of customers, not necessarily individual customers or parcels. The last step in the process, next slide, is the rate design. And we have, there's actually been some court cases very recently that have informed this as well. But we have several court cases that have given us some information in terms of how these costs are allocated, how we're supporting these costs in the rate study report, et cetera. But the primary objective is to ensure that rates are proportional to the cost of service. That is an essential requirement of Proposition 218. We also want to design rates that are equitable and non-discriminating. We would like for them to be easy to administer and for customers to understand. And we would like to provide revenue stability, right? We don't want to see huge fluctuations in the revenue coming in each month. We want to have some stability there. So that concludes the general overview of the rate setting process. If we want to pause for questions now.
Okay, thank you. So we can open the public comment on this section. If anyone have comment in the audience or online? We do. Oh, Stephanie Moreno, online.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Stephanie Moreno, this is basically the same presentation that was made in June of last year so far. My question are to the consultant, if she can answer these. Number one are the sewer cost. You talked about what's included in the sewer cost. Do they include the new revenue that is coming in from the septic pumpers that are dumping at our facility? I understand there's 6 or more loads a day going into that system, so that would represent a significant chunk of revenue that could offset costs. I also want to know if your firm takes the responsibility for ensuring that the fees are in compliance with state law as far as not exceeding reasonable charges. You mentioned the 2015 case, but there are other cases that talk about it cannot exceed the reasonable amount. Do you verify that the percentages that the city gives you in the budget are in fact reasonable, or do you rely on the city's verification of that? And then the third thing is, I did not hear you. I heard you say that you had updated the rate study to include the city's new budget, but I did not hear you say, or I may have missed, that you have updated the rates to include the latest Amador Water Agency increase in wholesale water rates, which would affect the city of Plymouth. And I'm wondering if those have been included. Thank you.
The first question and the last question were specific to the sewer rates and the water rates. Would you like me to answer those questions now or hold when we get into discussion specifically about water and sewer?
Well, if you have the answer ready, since she asked, you can go ahead and answer if you don't mind, or on those.
Okay. In terms of the sewer rate study, we will talk about that in a little bit more detail when we get into that section of the presentation. But yes, the contracts with the septic haulers has been considered in the updated analysis. So that was one question. Another question was about the whether or not NBS is validating the city's budget as it relates to being incorporated into the rate study. And no, we do not independently validate the city's budget. So in terms of how costs are allocated to the individual utilities, we do not do an independent verification of that. We receive the city's budget and incorporate that into the rate study. And that goes through its own adoption process. And then lastly, the information in the water rate study reflects the updated budget. So to the extent that updated budget also reflects increased costs from Amador Water Agency, then that is reflected in the analysis.
Thank you. Any
Did I
other
forget
questions?
anything? Hopefully.
Robert, do you have a question?
Robert, longtime resident. Can you give me an example of the cost to each customer or customer class? I mean, I have a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house, but only 2 of us live there. Can you,
Yeah, customer classes are generally based on land use, and so we might have a customer class that includes residential property that is different from a customer class for, say, commercial property. That's
so
what we
it's
mean by customer
businesses
class.
and
Or schools or that sort of thing, yeah.
How many different customer classes are there? Oh, sorry.
The water rates, so in general, for water rates, we charge by meter size. And so when we start looking at, and most residential property is going to have the same meter size. So, in this case, we really are looking at the meter size as the way that we're distinguishing the customer classes for water. For sewer, we're looking at land use, and if it's okay, I'd prefer to answer that question once we get through the sewer rate study. Because
Absolutely.
it's a little different than what you currently have.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
And I apologize for jumping into public comment.
Huh?
I apologize for jumping into public comment.
So after the vice mayor, we have no others. Okay, I'm gonna close public comment again, move on to the next section.
Okay, next section of the presentation is regarding the water rate study. Oh, okay, there we go. So again, the purpose of the water rate study is to ensure that water rates are able to cover all of your operating and maintenance costs. We say build appropriate reserves as opposed to maintain appropriate reserves because that fund is currently sitting in a negative position. And of course, we want to ensure that we're complying with the legal requirements of Proposition 218. Next slide. All right. So before we get into the detail on this slide, what we are presenting here are 3 different versions of the water rates. And the reason that we're doing that is that we are showing various options related to the projected annual increase for rate revenue. When we talked in June of last year, we looked at these same alternatives before we incorporated the 25-26 budget. So now that we've incorporated that budget and brought the rates forward, now we're looking at those 3 alternatives again, and that's where we have the request for direction. So the first alternative that we'll go through is I think the most aggressive in terms of the rate revenue increases, where we're seeing a 30% increase in the first year. Okay, there are other options, so we'll go through this one. You can understand what this means from a financial perspective, and then we'll go through the next 2 options as well. So this slide, and I know there's a lot of data here. This is a summary of the water revenue requirement. So this shows you the current rate revenue. It shows interest earnings on the funds. It shows you the use of water funds. So what are those operating expenses? You do have a debt service obligation from your water fund. And then it shows what the amount of revenue from the rate increases is. Again, this shows a rate revenue increase schedule that has 30% increase in the first year, and then a 12% increase in the second year, followed by 3 6% increases. So it's front loading some of those rate increases. Those rate adjustments have been smoothed a little bit, but they're critical to address the existing budget deficit. As I mentioned, this fund is in a negative position. 3 through 5 rate adjustments are necessary to keep pace with inflation and begin to build reserves from the current negative balance. And on the next slide, we have a graphical representation of that financial plan. So you can see the bar chart shows the various colors in terms of the reserve fund contribution. There is no, and I left purposely on the legend, that green for rate funded capital. In this scenario, there is no capital being funded in these water rates because of that negative position of the fund. We go to the next slide. This shows your fund balances. We see where we're sitting in that negative position. And we see by the end of the 5-year rate period, that green line is the target reserve. And the blue bar is about a third of the way up to the line. So by the end of that 5-year rate period, you are just starting to get really to a positive position in that fund. And on the next slide, these are the nominal rates. So you can see in year 1 for customers with a 3/4 inch meter, that is about a $10 increase in the monthly fixed service charge. And the commodity rate is increasing by roughly $2 per 100 cubic feet, which equals 748 gallons of water. So again, this is the option where the rate increases are front loaded. And putting that in context of the region, you can see that currently you have some of the lowest rates in the region, and this increase, this is the year 1 increase, puts you at about the middle of the pack there in terms of a comparison regionally. And I do want to note, that's not always an apples to apples comparison. Everyone's system is a little bit different. People have done their rate studies at different times, et cetera. So it's not a real apples to apples comparison, but you can at least sort of see where you're sitting. So option number 2, or alternative 1, is smoothing out those rate increases and looking at a flat 12% rate revenue increase over the 5-year period. So we can see graphically on the next slide, that looks a little bit different. It's a little bit smoother line. We're just doing that 12%. This is the same situation where we have no capital expenses being funded. And on the reserves, you can see in this scenario, the fund remains in a negative position. So it becomes less negative, but it does not get to a positive position. And in this case, the rates in that year 1, the fixed charge goes up by about $4 a month, and the volumetric charge goes up about $1 per HCF. And then alternative number 2 that we're showing you is slightly different. It's got a 20% increase in the first year, a 16% increase in year 2, and then 8%. So some more similar to option 1, but a little less aggressive on the front end, and starting to make up for it a little bit on the back end. You can see the financial plan, again, fairly smooth. And you can see the reserves on the next slide do start to move to a positive position, but not quite as positive as option number 1. And the rates on year 1, it's about if I can do quick math, $6, a little more at $6.50 increase on the fixed charge monthly, and then about $1.40 increase to the commodity rate. So again, a little softer on the front end, but the rates continue to increase. So those are the 3 options again that we looked at last June. So I wanted to present those again. Certainly happy to have a conversation as needed about any of those. And ready for questions about the water rates.
Okay, yeah, we can open it up to public comment again on this if we want. Anybody in the audience Rosemary.
Okay, I realize this is just a presentation, but I just want to say before the 218 hearing and they bring out the rate case so that people can review it before the 218 hearing, are the revenue and expenses, they're lumped into one line item in these. Are they going to be broken down so the rate payers can see exactly what goes into each of those line items?
The rate study report will include detail of all of the operation and maintenance expenditures that are included, as well as well, there's only one revenue line item. It's your rate revenue and your interest, but all the expenditures are broken out.
Anyone else? All right, Stephanie Marino online.
Stephanie Moreno. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to compare these charts to the ones that you presented last year. And it looks like last year there were fewer columns. And I guess that's what you meant by softening the rates, is that you've spread them over more years. But the final figure for 2020, 31 is still lower than the 2930 that was presented as being needed in June. So I was wondering if you could explain why the final figure on these has gone down. I'm comparing option 2 to option 2 right now. Rather than I understand the softening concept, but I would assume that the revenue needs would match the same at the end as indicated in the first slide, but I could be missing something. Thank you, Sarah.
I want to make sure I understand the question. Can you point to the slide that you're referring to?
Is she still on?
Sorry, I had to be unmuted again. Thank you. I'm looking at the slide for rate alternative 2 that's in the city council packet and comparing it to the rate utility schedule that was in the June, option 2 that was in the June 12th, 2025 packet. That shows that the final figure in the last column was 1,065,792. This is showing 1,026,109.
That's a function of plugging in the new budget information. The budget for water did go down slightly when we updated the budget with the 25-26 adopted budget information. So then as that's increased over the years, we didn't change any of the rates of inflation, but we did plug in those new numbers for 25-26 based on the budget. And so then, of course, that compounds year over year with the inflationary factors that we've built in. But because we're starting with a little bit lower rate or a little bit lower budget, at the end, we get to a different number. It's just a function of plugging in the new budget and, and the timing of the rates as well. Now we're
okay. That makes sense. But the percentages of rate increases did not change. The last column for 2930 in the June one shows a 75.35% increase at 1,065,000, and this one for 2030-31 for 126 is showing also a 75.35% increase. So were the percentages not adjusted?
No, the percentages are the same. We're looking at the same scenarios related to the increase of rate revenue in both cases. So we're setting and saying that yellow line that is shown on each of the 3 alternatives that shows the projected annual rate increase, that is where we are looking at the various options for how the rates might increase. Either in option 1, we have a 30% increase in the first year, then we have 12% in option 2, or we have 20% in option 3. So we're looking at how that rate revenue increases in comparison to the budget in all three scenarios.
Okay, thank you. I don't understand why the percentages in the gold bar did not change from June to now, but thank you.
Mayor Nunn, after we do public comment, can we take a quick break?
Yes. Okay, do we have anyone else for public comment? Hearing and seeing none, we are going to take a short break here. Closing public comment on this. Okay, we're gonna get started here again. Yeah, go ahead. There.
All right, now we are on to the sewer rate study.
Sarah, I have a question, if you don't mind. Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, the maximum reserve allowed under Prop 218. What is that? How much can we have in our reserve?
Prop 218 doesn't specify an
Oh.
amount that you can have as a maximum. So in general, we typically see for operation and maintenance reserves, a 3 to 6 month of O&M. So whatever your monthly O&M budget is, typically we see 3 to 6 months in reserves. We've set the target here for purposes of our analysis at 3 months, which I think we would generally consider a minimum. For capital reserves, we like to see somewhere around 3% of net assets. Again, 3 to 6% of net assets is kind of a typical capital reserve.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure because they're very strict about the cost meeting the revenues. To
Right.
make sure that it's even, but there's
Yeah.
no cap on the reserves.
No, there's not a specific
Okay.
cap really. It's making sure that it's reasonable, making sure that it's, something that's thoughtful. Some communities actually have reserve policies and they could have other types of reserves for things like rate stabilization or depending on what your source of supply of water is in communities that maybe have a lot of wells, for example. They may have a different need for reserves because of their different source of supply. So it really varies by community, but there is not a, you can only have X dollars kind of thing
Gotcha.
in Prop 218.
Perfect. Thank you. I have one more question. The commodity rates. So those increases, we have our current rate, are they just projections? The commodity rate increases per year for
The budgeted increase of how much
we're going to be charged for water.
what you're being charged for the purchased water.
Correct.
Yeah, so we have estimated what those are going to be. Again, it's from the budget, but we
Okay.
also,
That's-
I was just gonna look at the rate of inflation, the source of supply, the rate of inflation, and this was provided to us by staff, is we're looking at a 10% estimated inflator for that source of supply. So each of the various costs in the O&M budget is inflated by a different amount depending on what the appropriate, so like your labor costs are going to inflate differently than your source of supply or your electricity or what have you.
Yeah, perfect. Answered my question. Thank you.
All right, so jumping into the sewer rate study, we have very similar objectives for the sewer rate study. We want to ensure that the rates will be able to cover all of the operating and maintenance costs. Here, we want to ensure sufficient funding for essential capital improvements. There is some capital that is being considered in the sewer rate study. And you'll notice the language change here that we want to maintain appropriate reserve funds because there is a positive fund balance and of course comply with Proposition 218. One of the other considerations here is the equivalent dwelling units. And what we want to talk about a little bit here is that you have a current code of ordinances that designates an EDU or equivalent dwelling unit method to calculate the equivalent dwelling units that is assigned to each parcel. That calculation only looks at volume and it does not look at strength. And so those EDUs are supposed to be updated annually, and we understand that they have not been recalculated for a few years. So we are proposing with this, and this was partially, this is something new since we had a conversation in June. And the reason that we're looking at these revised EDU calculations is really considering that septage hauler customer. The strength of the effluent that is being delivered to the treatment plant by a septage hauler is very different than the effluent that is coming from your, say, your residential property through pipes to the treatment facility. And so now bringing in that strength factor is something that is important to ensure that each customer is paying the appropriate cost of service. So what we're proposing is a revised EDU or equivalent dwelling unit calculation that considers both volume and strength of effluent. One residential unit would still be one equivalent dwelling unit, right? So that's what EDU means, that your single family is the basis, and your calculating EDUs is a way to compare other land uses or customers to that equivalent dwelling unit. And those EDUs are calculated based on both volume and strength factors. And also, one of the things that we found is that the number of gallons per day based on the customer data is actually a little bit lower than what has been used previously to calculate the EDUs. So we're sort of resetting everything in order to make sure that we are looking at current data and we're able to consider both the volume and the strength of the effluent. So with that, we'll jump into the sewer revenue requirements. So again, this is a very similar process to water. We're looking at the current fees. We're looking at the revenue that you receive, as well as the costs in terms of the operating and maintenance expenditures. There is very minimal existing debt service that exists here as well. Here you can see that we are looking at one option, which has 5% annual increases across the board in the rate revenue. The next slide has the financial plan graphically. And we're not showing rate funded capital expenditures here. And that's really just a function of the fact that in the model, we're looking at those capital expenditures, which are fairly minimal, coming out of your reserve bucket instead of coming out of the rate bucket first. The next slide shows the reserve fund levels. You can see currently the reserve fund is a little bit higher than that target. Again, we're looking at a 3-month of operation and maintenance to set that target. And this is the schedule. All customers, again, we're looking at that EDU basis. So those equivalent dwelling units would be calculated for each customer. But again, single family residential is the basis for the EDU calculation. So one EDU would go from that $80.66 to $86.39 in the first year. And this shows where you are regionally. So popping up just a little bit there by that $6, but still quite a bit lower than some of your neighboring agencies. So we'll pause there. The next couple of slides talk about next steps for the adoption process, but we'll maybe take questions about the sewer rate study if that's appropriate now.
Okay. So start with public comment and public comment on the sewer rate stuff. Yeah, Rosemary, come on.
Rosemary Marino, Moody, Plymouth. Just the same thing with the water, make sure that the rate study shows a breakdown of the costs also by line item. The other thing with this EDU, so let's say a business, would they have maybe multiple EDUs? Is that what? I'm just trying to understand this. You say residential is one. So let's say a business or the 49er or the fairgrounds. How would they compute the EDUs for those?
In order to calculate the EDUs for each of the individual land uses, we would be looking at, and there are standardized calculations from the State Water Resources Control Board in terms of the biological oxygen demand or total suspended solids relative to customer classes. So we would be looking at the flow and the strength based on that land use. So looking at commercial, for example, that is going to be, I'm just double checking the numbers. They would be at about 0.94 EDUs, as compared to 1 EDU for a residential. And then various other land uses, would look different as well. So restaurants, might look a little bit different than some other businesses. We'll look at schools, industrial. You don't have a lot of industrial customers, but you do have some. And so we are looking at all of those land uses and reviewing their flow and strength to come up with the EDU calculation.
Okay, anyone else in the audience? With Stephanie Moreno online.
Thank you. I just wanted to first of all confirm that my understanding is you're changing residential from 200 to 125 gallons. I wanted to know if there's going to be, as asked by Robert previously, different breakdowns within the residential EDU, so that not all residences are charged the same. If there's different ways of doing that. I would like to know if the EDU breakdowns are going to be in the materials that you provide to the public for the Prop 218 hearing. And I'd like to know if the current rate for septic haulers is based on volume only rather than volume and strength, as indicated, as should be done by Sarah as a best management practice. And I also want to know what happens if the septic haulers, if we stop having that practice because of volume impacts to our system, how that would affect the rates going forward. Thank you. Because the volume and strength would change. Thank you.
The first question I heard, I think, was the difference, and what I thought I heard was that residential was going from $200 to $125. I just wanted to make sure it is gallons as the standard. And yes, that is based on the current data. The average flow for a residential property is 125 gallons. So now that is the basis to which we're comparing other customer classes. So that was the first question. You had a lot of questions and I didn't write fast enough to get all of them. So then you were asking about the septage hauler. We're looking at their revenue. We only have 1 month roughly of revenue from the septage hauler. So we don't have a lot of history to be able to extrapolate across, say, a full year of data. So while we are incorporating the septage hauler in the calculations, we are looking at their data, and this is a delicate balance in terms of understanding how much effluent they bring. If we assume that they are 50% of the total strength and volume, then we would allocate 50% of the cost to them. If they don't bring any septage to be treated at your system, then you don't have 50% of your revenue, right? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
So based on the fact that we don't have a long history of data here, we have been fairly conservative in understanding the level of revenue that they're bringing and the level of septage that they're bringing to the system, so that we don't end up in a situation where they no longer bring any septage, no longer bring any revenue, and you don't have enough money to operate your system. So again, just trying to make sure that we're, being conservative in terms of what we're assuming that they're bringing, because we don't have a long history to base that on.
Okay, anyone else for public comment? Okay,
Did I answer all of the questions?
I believe so. Is Stephanie Moreno still on? If you didn't. Okay, if she's not there, then
I'm here. I'm just having trouble getting unmuted.
Here
I
you go.
asked if they were gonna include this, all the EDU breakdowns within the Prop 218 materials that are gonna go out, between residential and commercial and the subcategories of those, when she talked about land use. I also asked, and this is probably more of a question for the city manager than her, but she said best management practices to base prices on volume and strength. Is the current rate for the septic haulers, the revenue that we're bringing in, which is included in the rate study, on a tentative basis, since we only have 1 month of data, is the current rate for septic haulers based on volume only or on volume and strength? Thank you.
Are you in the room at all? Can you hear us?
I'm sorry, I just got a request to unmute. I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, it looked like you were talking, but we were not hearing anything except for the very last couple of words.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did talk. The questions that were not answered were whether or not the different land use EDU breakdowns for both residential and commercial would be included in the Prop 218 documents. The other question that wasn't answered, but maybe it's a question for the city manager. Sarah indicated that best management practices to base your EDU on volume and strength, especially when you have septic haulers coming in. And I asked if the current rate for septic haulers that's being charged by the city is based on volume and strength, or if it's only based on volume. Thank you. Did you hear that? Yes?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, the EDU information will be in the full rate study.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else for public comment? Hearing and seeing none, close public comment and move forward.
So in terms of process, there is something new and exciting that I am happy to share with you. Proposition 218 has always required that we prepare a rate study and that we send out Prop 218 notices that are mailed at least 45 days ahead of the public hearing that have the rates and information about where the full study is available, et cetera. There was a new law passed that now adds some additional steps to that process that provides a lot of extra protection for the city and allows for customers to provide additional feedback to the rate study. So that involves a written objection process that has to be a substantive objection, which is different than a protest, which is just sort of, I don't want, I can't, I don't like the rates, right? So there's a general protest versus a substantive objection. So as we move forward, we are proposing to include that written objection process. And all that does from your perspective is add a couple of paragraphs to that rate notice, and it adds a couple of weeks of time to the overall approval process. And then you would receive any written objections. Again, those are very substantive objections. All of the directions for how to do that would be included in that notice. And when you do that, it offers a level of protection to the city in terms of how those rates may be challenged in the future if they are. So again, good idea to move forward with that process, and it just adds a couple of weeks to the procedures. And once you have finished with that process, you have received any written objections, you have held your public hearing and received any protests. If there's not a majority protest or a reason in your written objections to stop the process, then you would be able to adopt your new rates.
So for item number 2, there's a 45-day noticing period. how much time has to pass between the 45 days to when we adopt the new rate?
So we would mail the notice out 45 days ahead of the objection deadline. And you would hold your public hearing typically a couple of weeks later, depending on what the various council dates are. And you would, assuming no majority protest, you would be able to adopt those new rates that same day that you determine that there's not a majority protest.
So you're saying a couple of weeks, is that typical, or should we err on the side of caution and go 30 days, or what's the best practice?
Up to you. This is a brand new procedure. It's been in place for a year. So I think, we're still figuring out the procedures. A lot of my clients are doing between 2 and 4 weeks additional time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Are we
So our
gonna do
next
one
step-
more, are we gonna do one more public comment, or are we gonna start discussing the rates and what we wanna?
Yeah, we can do one more public comment. We just had the one. I don't think we discussed anything new, but yeah, let's just go ahead and open it up one more time. Anyone have anything else to say?
Rosemary Marino, Moody, Plymouth. I'm curious why there are no other Amador County cities in the comparison. They're all out of county.
We can look at whatever comparative agencies you want to look at. These are agencies that are in the region who have, we try to find other agencies that have done their studies fairly recently. That's one of the things we're trying to look for. We did include Amador Water Agency. And again, really trying to just make sure that we're finding other folks that have done recent rate studies, because if they have not done a study for many years, again, we're not looking at kind of apples to apples. So, but if there's a particular agency that council or the community wants to see in the rate comparison, we're happy to include that.
Wait, excuse me, we're still in the public comment section. Stephanie Moreno?
Sorry, I have to wait until they give me the unmute. I'm concerned about this new objective written process component that's being added. It's going to be confusing for your ratepayers, no doubt. And my understanding is that those written objectives can be considered, but it's not legal for them to only count written objections and not count the protest ballots, that a majority protest protection is in place by the state constitution and case law. I'm asking if the consultant can clarify that for the council. Thank you.
The objections and the protests are considered separately. So if there are any written objections received, then the obligation on the part of the city is to respond in writing to those written objections. That is a separate process from counting the protests. After that objection process, then you still have your protests, you still count your written protests and determine whether or not there's a majority. So if someone were to object and protest, they would submit 2 documents to the city. Does that clarify?
And again, the process for doing both of these things will be explained on the 218 notices that get mailed out to everybody.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. She asked me if that explained it, and I just want to clarify again. So you're saying you would send out the objection ballots, so to speak, first, get those back, and then set out the protest ballots. So if people felt they had already responded once, they may not respond to the protest hearing, which is really the important piece. Is that correct?
There's no ballot provided in this process. There's a notice that is provided that explains to customers how to submit an objection and also how to submit a protest, but there is no mailed ballot at all.
Okay, I would like to encourage the council to be seriously consider whether that is going to be confusing for the residents and potentially cause a delay in your rate setting. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'm gonna close public comment. And we'll go to our discussion. Yeah, go discussion. You can start.
I have a question for you. Is there any other municipality in which a ballot is sent out for this?
I'm
As
trying to
regarding,
think if I have ever a couple of times. I'm struggling to even think of anyone who sends any kind of ballot. There are some communities that have a little bit of a tear off at the bottom of their notice, but it's not common. I don't think I've seen one of those in many years. So
Okay.
no, generally you don't mail a ballot.
okay. That's all for now.
So just to elaborate on that, I've seen different jurisdictions consider ballots and then kind of steer away from them because there's a concern that if somebody loses that ballot, they think that I can't protest. I lost my chance. They don't want to go through the hassle of asking for a new form. And that's not the threshold here for having a protest vote. The threshold for providing a protest is very low. You basically have to identify your property and that you're against the rate increase.
Okay, so providing a ballot could potentially cause more harm than good if more confusion, or like you're saying, if they lost the ballot, then they'll be like, oh, well, I'm just not gonna say anything because I lost my ballot.
It theoretically could. I've seen other jurisdictions kind of try to steer away from that because they're worried that that's going to make it seem too onerous for people to actually protest.
Anything else, Wendy? Do you have?
No.
You're good. Deborah?
I have nothing right now.
Okay, Wendy?
So there's under the impression that the receiving written objections is going to be confusing to people, correct? Is that what we're thinking? But isn't that required? Under
Yeah.
218, I mean, it's the law. We have to do it, right?
The written objection process is actually not required. The protest portion is required,
Okay.
but the written objection process is, again, that was new. It was AB 2257 that was adopted in 2024, effective January 1 of 25. You are not required to comply with that, but because of the level of protection that it offers in the event of a rate challenge, we certainly would recommend that you do, but it is not required.
Okay.
But there are separate sections in the notice, and I'm certainly happy to provide a sample of some of the language that we've used, but there's two sections. It says, if you wish to submit an objection is, and it explains what the objection is. And it says, then do this, right? And it gives you very discrete directions on how to submit an objection. It says, if you wish to protest, a protest is this, and this is how you submit a protest. So it's very step by step. It's broken out separately, and, happy to run that. Obviously, we will run that by your legal counsel and ensure, but we've used it for, I believe, all of our rate processes that we've done in the last year. And we have not received a lot of feedback that the process is confusing, for what that's worth. Okay.
Okay, and just my last comment on the proposed water rate regional comparison. I went to each one of these and searched their populations of what they service, and you did a nice job of ranging them. You have a good broad range, nothing way high on the scale and nothing too low on the scale. So
Thank you.
I applaud you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over.
No further comment or question, Wendy? Do you have your finger on the pulse there?
Oh, I just was gonna say, we still have to discuss which option we want with the water rate, so I just don't want us to forget that.
Now I was gonna bring that up next, once everybody had their thing. Okay, so if there's no other comments on that, so yeah. Number two, provide direction regarding the preferred scenario. So is anybody who wants to start that for what's the preferred scenario discussion on that? So that you have the two scenarios, option one, option two. And right, three, yeah. On the water.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So this is a little bit of a tough one, to decide how we want to do this. I think the writing is on the wall that we don't have a choice. We have to raise rates. We've gone so many years without doing so that we're obviously in quite a bind now. And essentially paying customers water bills is what's happening. City is subsidizing water bills. So we can't keep doing that because we've all seen our budget. This is, I would like to take an ease approach. Let me just say it this way. On a personal note, for myself as a water rate payer in the city of Plymouth, I would rather tear the Band-Aid off, get hit with the 30% up front, and then have the smaller percentages. That's how my mind works for myself. There's no way for me to poll every single citizen in Plymouth to find out how that sits with them. The increase, if we did the 30% upfront, is a $10 a month increase. So I think that when we break it down by cost per month, percentage sounds worse, right? Because the percentage sounds significant, but then when you look at the difference, hold on, that's not the right one. I'm trying to pull them all out here so I can compare all of them at the same time with the actual rate. I need one more.
And this is number three, right?
Most residential, customers have a 1-inch pipe, is that correct?
3/4 inch.
3/4 inch? Thank you.
Cause I know currently I pay $33.23. That's how I know that. I'm having a hard time finding the third one. I have that one. Where's the one that pops? Sorry, give me a second.
It's the second, it's a slow burn. Look at it, sort of thicker on this one. No, the break.
Got one. That's number one.
This one, where the reserves are. This one is.
Why don't I have the third one? Or whatever number one is. Okay.
Yeah.
We have 3 of these, right?
Yeah. Here,
What am I missing?
we also have, here,
Okay, Holger got it.
the cheap sheet right here. What do you want, one? That's got 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, thank you.
When you got them in.
Okay, so for the first proposal, essentially 33.23 and jumps. This year in July would jump to 43.16. But then it's only a couple of bucks per year after that. Versus the other 2 options have more of an increase in between each year. So me personally, as a consumer paying a bill, I would rather have the Band-Aid ripped off in the initial jump and then just have a couple bucks more a year. But that's just me. So I don't know how you poll everybody in Plymouth on how they feel about this. I wish there were more folks here to give public comment. I mean, I think all 3 options get us to the same end result, right?
The second option does not get you to a positive fund balance.
Okay,
Where the
so-
other 2 options do. I'd say that's the
Yeah,
biggest
so-
difference.
So that's alternative 1.
Correct.
So to me, that just gets removed from the table then. Because in my mind,
Yeah, option 1 does not work for me.
you mean alternative 1.
Alternative 1.
Option 2, alternative 1. Because if it's not gonna get us to a positive fund balance, then to me, that just takes that option right off the table. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, so looking at the positive fund, that's my concern is with how big we're going out of the gate, this, that, and the other. And for that reason, to become positive in fiscal year 27-28, I think it is with number 3. That would be my choice. So we don't make it too tough on people, but we have to do what we have to do.
And option 1
The
gets
increase.
us there this year? No.
No, next year,
Well, then they're both the same.
28. This one says 2028.
Neither option of, if you remove alternative 1, which doesn't ever get you to a negative.
Yeah,
or from
forget that.
negative to a positive. So if that one's off the table, if we're looking at 1 and 2 now, then 2 gets you to positive at the end, in the 5th year only. And 1 gets you positive.
Yeah.
A little bit positive in year 4, and then more positive in year 5. So you get there a little quicker, and you have a higher balance, right? You're closer to your target.
Okay.
I'm kind of feeling the same as Councilmember Cranford on it, that I'd rather, me personally, just do it this year, the one jump. And then have smaller increases from then on, is my feeling. The option 1.
I think with option 1, even though you have that large jump in the beginning, when you get to fiscal year 30, 31, your rate is actually less than alternative 1 or 2 by a little, but it is still a little bit less.
Yeah. True also.
I like the fact that we're funding the reserve with proposal. The proposal new schedule. Getting there, that's a foot in the right direction, for sure.
Are you guys ready to take a vote on it or give direction on it? Well, don't vote. Vote no, then be the odd man out, see how it feels for once. Tell you, it's pretty liberating when you try it a few times. It's my thing here, hang on.
We're
Okay.
just looking for direction here.
Direction, not a motion?
Doesn't need to be a motion. We're just looking for
Well, I
direction.
think we almost need a vote because we're not all the same. So I would vote that we just option 1. Agree with the others. Are you guys both thinking?
Option 1, or the,
And just to be clear, when you're saying option 1, you're talking about the first of the 3 scenarios we talked about tonight, not alternative 1 that you.
With a 30% increase.
Just right here on
the
top.
proposed
I can
water
give it
rate
to you.
schedule, I think that's what you're calling it.
Yeah,
It's not even, doesn't even say
proposed.
option 1, it just says proposed rate
Yeah,
schedule.
proposed water rate schedule that she provided
It has the 30% increase in year 1,
Yes.
12% in year 2, and then 6% in the last 3 years.
last 3.
Yes,
That's the one.
You're talking
That,
about, okay.
yeah. So I think.
Can
have,
we-
what, at least 4 for that, or?
Can we take public comment? Since we have at least a handful of people in the
Yeah.
public here, could we ask what they would like?
Yeah, that would be fine. I'll open up a public comment, as far as what scenario.
Stephanie
Out of the
has
3
her
we
hand
have.
up online.
Okay, Stephanie Moreno, online.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say, although ripping the Band-Aid off may be easier for some. There's a lot of people that are hurting right now, and many more in this community are at a lower income level than anyone sitting on the dais today. So please keep in mind how they might feel about the increase in rates. I wanted to ask the council if they could ask the consultant if it's possible to present the two options that you did, like the proposal and the alternative two, to the residents to see if they would indicate which they like better as part of this Prop 218. I don't know if that's legitimate or not, but I just wanted to ask if that's an option to give residents an option to vote on which alternative they prefer when they do the Prop 218 hearing. Thank you.
Right, if you want to speak to it, and then I
Yeah.
will.
When we do a Prop 218 hearing, we're presenting one rate scenario to the ratepayers, not giving them the option to vote for two different scenarios.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what she was asking is if we would do that, and my issue with that would be, at some point, we have to move forward and get this done. I think that would be, I would imagine, that would put us back at least another 30 days, if not longer. More than that, our attorney is saying. So we're looking at doing something like that, putting us out a couple more months, and we've already, how long have we been holding you back? Since at least June on this? Yeah. So I definitely understand what's being said, but I think we have to move forward. I don't know the feeling of the rest, but yeah, we will. Understand.
I just did a little quick math. The difference between in 26 and 27 between proposed water rate schedule and alternative two, which was our two options, it's $3.32 out of the gate the first year difference per month. So
Okay.
it's 10%.
I see what you're saying is if we do the 30%, it's only $3 more than doing the other alternative. Okay.
Yeah. So anyone else for public comment? Rosemary?
Rosemary Marino Moody. I know we need to do a rate change and all of that, but I also think you need to look at your constituents because there are a lot of widows who are on a single fixed income, Social Security, and their increase is very minimal each year. So a 30% may cause a problem for them because there's a lot of we have a high number of widows, one income families, residents now in the county, in the city. So I just wonder how it would affect them because I know some of them are struggling right now with the high grocery bills and to increase the water and sewer that high because you're increasing the sewer and the water. You're not just increasing one. So just 30% there, you're still doing another percent on the sewer. So that's a big difference to someone on a fixed income who has no other source of income. And unfortunately, there are a lot in town. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Anyone? Nothing online? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. And we're going to have to, do we want any more council discussion? Go ahead.
So I just want to say when this came up in June of last year, I was actually, I don't know if any of you remember that were here, but I was actually pretty against the 30% right out the gate because of the significant increase. Looking at this tonight though, and Councilmember Bottomley pointing out the $3 difference between option one and option three. And actually, in the following years, it's not that much of a difference either, about $1. I want to just make the statement that I have several family members that live in a low income bracket. So it's not about, I am empathetic and sympathetic to that situation. The city of Plymouth is also in a low income bracket. We have a budget coming up that is going to have $100,000 deficit. And you know, that's why I wish more people would have shown up tonight so we could have a better discussion about this, more constituents asking questions and giving us ideas of what they'd like. It's not easy. I don't want to be the council that raised water rates, but unfortunately, I mean, there's only one way to say this, but throwing some other councils under the bus over the last 14 years, when it continues to get kicked down the road over and over and over and over, somebody's eventually got to be the bad guy. And so I feel like we're kind of been forced into this situation where now we have to not just raise rates, but we have to exponentially raise rates just to catch up with the mess. So it's frustrating. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. That's not directed to constituents at all. It's just the whole situation is super frustrating because, yeah, now we're the bad guys that are raising rates, and because so few constituents show up to hear the decisions and everything, unfortunately, there'll be a lot of misunderstandings about that and why it had to be done. And that's just how the cookie crumbles with this kind of stuff, I guess. So I hear you when you say, you know, be considerate of people in these situations, and I am. One of the questions I do have for City Manager Begbie, do we have any sort of low income subsidy or anything like that for water? Like PG&E has a subsidy program, or Vicky, do you know? Do we have anything like that? And shame on me for not knowing.
I believe you. I'll have to confirm that tomorrow, and I can get back to you and everybody. We do have ways of working with families that are struggling.
Okay.
So there's a lot of leeway that we give
Okay.
constituents, but I can find that answer for you tomorrow.
Okay, and if we don't, let's obviously start looking at that, because I don't disagree. People are struggling, so I get it.
I believe we actually talked about that in June too.
I think we did too.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think we just had so much on our plate, and you know, with a new city manager coming in and stuff, I think it just kind of fell in between the cracks. As far as actually looking into a program for the low income, but it definitely doesn't mean we can't start tomorrow morning on, and get on it. So that being said, is there anything else from the council members?
I just want to note that on the sewer revenue requirements page, there is a line item for low income credit for the sewer.
Yeah.
So we do
Thank
have
you.
a small program for that. Let's try to get one for water.
No, I just wanted to say that, reiterate my strong opposition to the 30% and go with the 20%, because once I factor in sewer and water, it's almost just over $9 increase. And I mean, I'm looking at it as like 2 gallons of gas or another gallon of milk and a loaf of bread and stuff like that. So I just want to be out there saying that I'm not for the 30%, and that is my case.
I can get on board with Holger. When you add it up, I didn't really think of it that way.
Anything else? Debbie?
When you talk about doing the 20%, is it just not taking into account building up our reserves or adding the other 10% later down the road?
So it is spread out differently. 20% the next fiscal year, 16%, and then it drops down to 8, 8, and 8 versus the 30 going to 12 and then 6, 6, and 6.
But what she's saying is one of these, Sarah, remind us again, one of these gets us built into a better position than the other.
Correct. The first option with the 30% increase in the first year gets you to a positive fund balance a year earlier and gets you to a total that is higher. So you end up in a more positive position with the first option than you do with the third option. But in both scenarios, you do end up positive.
So the question to the vice mayor, okay, I'm listening to what you're saying, but if you look just 1 year out, the 20% option is compared to the 30%, you go 30% and then you go up 12. So you're talking an increase of 32% just on this. If you go down to the 20%, yes, it's 10% less this year, but fiscal year 27, 28, it goes 16. So it's actually more of an increase in 1 year's time. They're actually a higher increase than if you go with 30%.
Correct. It is 4% more. My anticipation and thinking is that it is lower now at 20%. And because people typically get cost of living adjustments, et cetera, that the 4% that is extra in the next fiscal year, 27, 28, would not feel as heavy of a burden as it is a 30% upfront.
Okay, I have something else to throw out. I'm curious about what you guys think about this. I was just thinking about it. It might be even a silly thing to say. So let's say we do this rate study, doesn't matter which one we pick, but let's say we go with the alternative 2. And then let's say, well, in 5 years, there's supposed to be another rate study. What if that doesn't happen? Then,
But that would be up to the then serving council, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But do you see where I'm getting with this? Like, it's been several councils that didn't do a rate
It's
study.
been 11 or 12
So
years,
what,
right?
how do
15 years
we
up.
end up, it's been 14.
That's an increase.
So, well, this year will be 15 years. So I guess what I'm getting at is how is this council leaving things better off in a situation if there is no rate study done 5 years from now? Do you see what I'm saying?
Because with
I
either
do. I agree.
scenario, you'll be positive.
Yeah.
And in 3031, it's actually less on the option number 1 versus alternative 2 is actually less.
By 60%.
Right? Yeah. I mean, the fee is actually less.
Don't forget to turn your microphones on when you talk, just to make sure everybody on Zoom can hear.
Yeah. You're supposed to one. I don't know. I still kind of agree with what Wendy said originally. It's nobody likes this, but we've got to get it done. And I'm looking at the option that gets us more into the positive, the quickest. I think we're only talking a couple dollars, difference on it, which I understand a couple dollars matters. I just feel better. It's like, we got to do it, just do it and get it done and get us into the positive is my feeling. The quickest way.
And also, the quicker we build up our reserves, if we are going to implement a low income subsidy, we could use that money, correct? That's where it would come from. Nope. Oh,
No.
You cannot use rate revenue to subsidize the low income. That has to come from another source of funds.
shoot.
I know that because I think we asked about it in June.
I wasn't-
I know.
Sorry.
I just got information from Miss Vicky, who got it from Tracy, that we do have a low income subsidy program in place already.
Okay.
For water, correct?
She stated that it's a blanket amount, just that's off of people who qualifies bill, out the total bill.
Okay, so knowing that, Vice Mayor, where you at on this?
I'm pretty steadfast.
What's the amount off?
She stated it's only $16. I have no idea how that was calculated, but it was in place when she started working here.
Okay.
So unless anybody has anything else to say, it seems to me like we probably need to take a vote on it now at this point. What do you think? On the option 1 or the option 2? Well, I'm saying, I think we should take a vote on it. I don't know if anybody's gonna say that. We want to vote on which one we're gonna go with, since we seem to be somewhat split.
I would go with the proposed water rate schedule, the first option.
I would too.
Me three.
I'd like alternative 2.
I'm fine with either option. We already have a majority.
Okay, so we're gonna go with 1. We're clear? Okay, thank you. Yes, moving on to item 5.2, update employee, excuse me, hang on a second. Update employee handbook and municipal code revisions, direction for future council consideration. And if we can get these staff report for that, and then I'll open to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city employee handbook and municipal code 2.08.090 serve as foundational documents governing personnel policy, employee conduct, disciplinary procedures, and general employment standards. Over time, both documents have become outdated, inconsistent, and in some instances unclear, leading to confusion and administration of staff matters. Several provisions did not reflect current laws, best practices, or operational procedures. During recent personnel reviews and administrative matters, city management identified areas where the handbook and municipal code lacked clarity or conflicted with each other. These inconsistencies created challenges in ensuring transparent, fair, and legally compliant personnel management. Fiscal impact is limited to existing staff time required to implement the updated policies. And it is our recommendation that the city council review the updated employee handbook and propose amendments to municipal code 2.08.090 and provide direction for these items to be brought back for discussion and consideration at a future regular city council meeting. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that for a minute, we had this before you a few meetings back, and you'd asked for a track changes version of this so that the council and members of the public could see the changes we're proposing more clearly. So this is really mostly here to put that version in front of everybody. It's a lengthy, dense document. So again, as we discussed last time, I think the most effective way to provide feedback on this is written comments. But if there's any specific questions right now, happy to address those. But mainly this is to get it in front of everybody, get everybody thinking about it, and then we'll put it on again on a future agenda item based on written feedback and any feedback we get right now.
Okay. So at this point, we'll open it to public comment. Any public comment? Rosemary, come on up.
Rosemary Marino Moody, Plymouth. I agree with Andreas that you probably should put this off. Because I'm looking at this, it seems like the city manager pretty much has control of all the processes and the selection. And it shows that he can decide where to do the recruitment. So we've had instances in the past where it's only been on the city website and someone's been hired within a day and it's been pulled down. So I don't think that's a great policy. I think there should be more overview. They talk about an HR department. I mean, who is the HR department at the city of Plymouth? And I also saw where there's a lot of stuff, but I'm just pointing out a couple. That for purposes of verifying information provided of the applicant's background checks that include but not limited to DMV has been scratched. I think it's really important that we have background checks of our employees, especially if they're going to be driving vehicles. So it's always good to do a background check and to do a DMV. Because most of the employees seem to be driving, or even if they're driving their own vehicle on company time, that's an issue. Now, when I worked for the Postal Service, our contractors had to provide an updated insurance, and we had to see their driver's license every year. And they were subject to a background check every 4 years. So, I mean, it just seems like the city should really consider those options just as, you know, to defer any liability down the line, because you hire someone and find out later that they had, you know, some background, questionable things in their background. Thanks.
Thank you. Stephanie Marino online.
Yes, Stephanie Moreno, thank you again for providing the track changes document. Before I start on that document, I wanted to address something that I heard from Councilmember Cranford a couple of times about the lack of people in the audience. The city has chosen not to share its agendas on the 3 Plymouth Facebook pages that are well used any longer. That happened several months ago, probably about the same time you noticed the reduction in audience. If they would start sharing those agendas again, you might see more attendance at the meeting. I don't know what the policy direction was to stop sharing the agendas to members of the public in that very accommodating venue, but it was a decision that was made nevertheless. Regarding the policy, the interim city manager said that there was no fiscal impact. That isn't necessarily true. It still continues to grant the city manager unilateral authority to start an employee anywhere in a salary range, which is highly unusual, without coming to the council. It fails to specify the exact employee benefits provided to employees. For example, the current in lieu health payment that employees are taking is not even listed in here. Who's setting that rate and who's allowing them to take that money from their in lieu health and apply it to deferred comp? It's not even called out in the employee handbook. That's a fiscal impact to the city. They've changed the standby pay, so it's no longer outlined what it's going to be. It's now very vague as to what the standby pay is. And I know you have several employees on standby on the weekends and after hours. And you are allowing the employee to unilaterally decide if they want to take cash for overtime instead of earning comp time. This is highly unusual. Usually it's unless there's a representation by union, it's usually management's decision as to whether employees take comp time or at a time and a half rate or overtime cash. And that is a fiscal impact to the city. You all indicated you're concerned about fiscal, the state of the finances. This would be an area that you could perhaps curb some potential abuses. And then the final thing is that nothing appears to address the contentious issue of previous city management hiring multiple members of the same families without consistently advertising the position. I think Rosemary brought that up as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? No one in the audience? Seeing and hearing no one, I'm going to close public comment at this time. And we will open for council discussion about this.
I really am not in a position to discuss this tonight. I'm exhausted. We've been doing this since 12:15 today.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make any we have a lot to muddle through. To Stephanie's point, Rosemary's point, there's a lot of stuff in here that needs to be discussed. So I think that the plan wasn't to really discuss much, but more to just review with all the changes, and that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I believe it was just basically put it out so the public can review it also as well as us. And what's our plan on this, Andreas, Cameron? It's to bring it to the next meeting or 2 meetings out, or what? Give us time to review it and public input?
I think the hope was that we do some of the changes tonight, bring it back corrected and for a vote later on, but it's at the council's pleasure.
Yeah, but like the councilwoman said, we've been at this since noon and we have quite a bit more to go tonight. So unless there's objections from other members, they think we'll put it off till at least next meeting too. And that'll give us time to really go through it.
If anybody who's got substantive questions, comments, can just send them directly to me. I can go through the entire draft again once. I haven't re-reviewed it since we last spoke about it. I didn't want to take the time and then go back and make more changes. It's more efficient for me to just go through it once I have everybody's feedback, and then I'll come back and we'll present the revised draft at the next meeting. If I get written feedback soon enough to get it ready for the next meeting. Otherwise, it'll come back the following meeting, but it is a priority for us to get this updated.
Yes, yeah, I understand the priority on it. I just, given what's behind us and ahead of us tonight, and they think it is a lot of information as stated, so we'll put it off for tonight, but that doesn't mean we can't have, if anybody has anything to add, some discussion about it right now. If anybody has anything right now they want to bring up.
I'm not in a position to discuss it tonight.
Okay.
I'm not either.
I think it behooves us for the public to send specific questions onto Mr. Boer and CCing Mr. Bigby. And I also think we need to revisit.
Can we give, as a team, can we come up with a bit of a deadline to just a informal, is that okay? If we, informal deadline between the 5 of us to send comments and suggestions to Andreas so that we know when that's gonna happen, and I feel like for myself, if I make it an action item of something I need to get done, I'm gonna get it done.
Andreas, when would you like feedback or questions?
I realize everybody's busy, so saying this Friday is probably a little overly optimistic, but if everybody could get me comments by the end of next Monday, I think that would give me enough time to
So February 2nd?
The second,
look through everything and put it
Thank you.
together in time to get it on the next packet.
So another question, I don't know if we provide your email to the public or not, and do you want that, or do you just want everything to
Let's
go to the
just have
city
everything
manager?
from the public go to Cameron and.
Okay, and city manager will forward.
Yep.
The public's comments to you, okay.
My email's not a secret, but that way.
Yeah, I just think that, yeah, it might be easier for the city manager to just put those all together, bundle them and send them to you. Okay, well, that being said, look at my thing here. So decision made on that. We will go to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have 2 other septic haulers right now. That we've signed contracts with. We've also engaged in a contract for pop-up number 1. It's called Route 49 Cards, and they do trading cards, baseball, Pokemon. That's what my kids do. So those kind of cards in pop-up 1, and they take possession of that on February 1st. And that we're rolling along. So Andy, our finance director, was in town, met with Ricky, our accountant, this week, and Andy was pretty impressed with the movement that's been going on in that area. So we're encouraged that we'll be able to wrap up this first audit that we're currently in right now, and then work on the remaining outstanding ones. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to item 7, mayor and council members' reports and council requests for future agenda items. Start with Wendy. Cranford, excuse me,
Nothing at this time.
Deborah?
Wendy Bottomley and I went to a new council person training last week. I thought it was really good. It was a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but it was helpful. The only thing that I had for a future agenda item was, I believe it was at the December meeting, we had talked about doing a policy to give like a 5% discount to local vendors or contractors. And I just wondered if that was going to be coming before us soon.
Yeah, we're working on a revised procurement policy and we're very close to done with that. That should be at your first February meeting.
Thank you.
I have nothing. She talked about the training. It was great, very informative. But yeah, that's it.
Mayor Don Nunn and I, together with Cameron Begbie, our interim city manager, and Sheriff Gary Edmond, held a town hall meeting just this last Saturday. To say that we had an overwhelming outpour of people is probably an understatement at this point. What did you estimate? 100 people?
More than that.
Yeah, I'd probably say about 125.
Okay. Came out. I would consider it a successful meeting. I took heavy notes and I promised everybody that I would take your concerns back with me to our next meeting. With the tribal meeting, with the tribal members. Your top 3 concerns, I just want to reiterate, is water usage, and an impact on your water, the lighting situation of the parking lot, and then also the concern about the speed and traffic increase. Furthermore, I had reached out to Kanan, Public Works Director, and I'm working with him to make it safer for the entrance at Zinfandel Ridge, since it's very dark out there. And I do not have a future agenda item at this point.
Yeah. So I would just reiterate, basically the vice mayor spoke to our meeting. There's been huge concerns brought forward here at these meetings about the traffic situation in town by several residents. I believe that the sheriff addressed a lot of those things on Saturday at that meeting. We have been considering probably in the future having another council discussion about some of those measures, but it looks like, sounds like the sheriff is taking some mitigating measures right now. So I think hold off on putting anything on the agenda about that at the moment. And I have nothing else to add to it. So that being said.
One moment, Mr. Mayor. For the tribal ad hoc, we did have a meeting also to report back on Friday, January 9th, where we had a roundtable discussion. Bottom line is that everyone's open to future government to government relations and talks. Unless I'm missing something, feel free to chime in as well.
Yeah. No, I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah, we did talk, and I think establish it in the future. Plans to meet on anything, any collaborations needed to meet with them. So with that being said, I think we're going to be moving to closed session. So I'm going to open the floor for public comment on items 8.1 and 8.2. 8.1 conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, one case Outfront Media versus City of Plymouth, and 8.2 public employee appointment city manager. Anyone wishing to make public comment on those matters? Stephanie Marino has her hand up.
Thank you, Stephanie Moreno. On 8.2, I just want to remind the council that you've only been here a little over a year, most of you. You've had the ability to point back to the previous council on many items, the problems that they caused, and it's undoubted. It's obviously true that they did cause a lot of problems for the city, but the decision you make regarding the permanent city manager position is one that you will own. And you will be setting the tone for what happens in the coming years. So I want to make sure that you understand the concern about making sure it's a decision that we can all live with. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? In closed session? Somebody on there? All right, hearing and seeing no one, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn for closed session at 8:05. 8:35.
Turn our video on too.
Yeah. I think our video's on. I think we're okay. It says we're recording. Yes. All right. So the council met in closed session to discuss two items. On the Outfront Media litigation, the council directed the city manager and city attorney to negotiate a $0 settlement agreement with Outfront Media. On the public employment for the city manager, the city council has narrowed the candidates down to two finalists that we will be conducting background screenings on.
Meeting will be adjourned at 9:08 PM.